Okay, great. Our hero is here. Hey there, Jonathan.
Hi, Robert. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Okay, so let me just explain. People will be joining, don't worry, but I'll let them in. The vast majority normally watches the replay because of the time. We had to change the time and then they
Yeah.
have to change their calendar. So don't worry about that. So most important is I'll, introduce you and you'll basically tell your journey, your story, who you are. How do you stay so fit? You look actually incredible. Have you gotten some plastic surgery done or something? So we're going to start, and I'll just let the people in as they come forward. So for those of, I want to thank you very much for doing this and taking the time to
Thank you.
share with us your journey and particularly in trying to restore the environmental balance by focusing on fuel-free and low-carbon infrastructure. So for those who are not familiar with SDCL and not familiar with Jonathan Maxwell or HSBC and all of
Yeah.
uh, the incredible things you've accomplished in your life, just briefly tell us who you are, what you do, what's your big purpose, and what are your plans going forward in the next 5 years?
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Well, shall I get going with it?
I'm on mute now.
Well, look, great. Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. So, just as quick background and introduction, yeah, my name is Jonathan Maxwell. I'm the CEO and founder of Sustainable Development Capital, or SDCL. Um, my background is I've been in the investment financial services business for the last 30 years. The last 20 odd of which I've been in the infrastructure sector and infrastructure services. And for the last 16 years, I've been building and then managing sustainable development capital as an independent investment firm. So I will quickly focus on that journey. I started the company in 2007. That was the beginning. Where we are currently is about $2.5 billion of assets in our portfolios, managed through a series of funds, some public and some private. The idea behind sustainable development capital, Robert, 15, 16 years ago, was I think looking out, I felt that some of the largest and most important thematic and strategic opportunities were going to be around solving problems associated with the environment. And that really means, I'm not just being nice, but what that means is, how's the energy system going to adapt to the needs of the growing population over the course of the next generations? How are we going to provide people not just enough energy, but also enough sort of other resources that are critical to, essential. So, for example, things like food and water and so on. How are we going to manage the waste? How are we going to get people around? And my original thinking there was that this was a new class of infrastructure, environmental infrastructure, if you like, as opposed to some of the infrastructure that I was working on before, like social and economic infrastructure. So that was the sort of the starting point for Sustainable Development Capital. I started the company in 2007. If you remember back to 2007, it was quite a different time. At the beginning of 2007, there were no iPhones. The IPCC hadn't won a Nobel Prize, nor had Al Gore for promoting or discussing climate change broadly. Sustainability wasn't really a thing. One small piece of evidence of that, Robert, is I was able to get the name of this company, Sustainable Development Capital. You could say facetiously that nobody really cared much about sustainability, but they do now. And here we are in 2024. It's one of the largest, I think, themes in the financial services and investment market. It's critical to most corporate operations. And it's also pretty much core to government objectives, targets. And I talk about sustainability because I think it breaks down into kind of three core components. One, very broadly, is around energy, and the second is very broadly around climate, and then the third is very broadly around security. And I think getting sustainability into the energy sector, getting sustainability into the way that we can manage around climate change, and getting sustainability into the way that we manage security, I think are three really critical features that define all of the work that we do today and how we make investments. Again, very high level investment thesis is that, for me, focused on this word sustainability. Sustainability is synonymous with resource efficiency. What I mean is, if we can be more efficient with the use of resources, efficiency, if we can be more efficient with the use of resources, in principle, we can do the same or more with less. And if we come back to those three sort of pillars of energy, climate, and security, if you can do the same or more with less, in principle, that means that you can create the same amount of energy services or even more using or wasting less energy. I'll explain why that's important. The second is, you could actually do the same amount of work on the energy sector without creating as much of a carbon footprint, which is critical for climate. And then if you can do the same or more with less, dare I say it, you may need to fight less over energy, which of course the world has been doing post the Second World War, very often in the Middle East, and now very sadly in the Eastern Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that's really the sort of the pillar of the organization, how we think as an investor about resource efficiency. Why does it matter? It's cheaper, it's cleaner, it's more reliable, and better and more secure than the alternative. Last thing I'll say, just thematically, Robert, and maybe try and dig into some specific areas that you're interested in. Yes. Thematically, we do focus on energy. So a lot of what we do is really around the energy sector. And I just explained very, very quickly why that we do that, because there's lots of other problems. But very broadly, if we look at this concept of efficiency, I think there are three big wins that the world can make in the next 10, 15 years. The first big win, maybe the biggest one, is around the energy sector, which is one of the reasons we're so focused on it. And the energy is essential to everything. Nobody can do it. We couldn't be having this conversation without it. But isn't it extraordinary? I think it's the biggest dirty secret of the energy sector, maybe of the financial system. The biggest dirty secret of the whole sector is that about 3/4 of the world's energy is wasted.
Whoa.
I can unpack it. I've even written a book about it, which we can talk about in a second. But that's a big, big, big problem. But it's also a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity because, and that's one of the biggest opportunities of the next, I'd say, decade or two, is trying to eliminate as much, if not all, of that waste that we can. And that will have the biggest bang for the buck from a greenhouse gas emission reduction perspective, from an economic competitiveness perspective, and to help with security. That's one of three major problems, and it's the one I'll talk about today. The fact that we waste about half of the world's food and a third of the world's water are also enormous problems that need to be solved. But at SDCL, from our investment portfolios, in fairness, our focus is on the energy sector. Another reason we're so focused on the energy sector, as I said, or intimated, was that of all the human-made greenhouse gas emissions, excess greenhouse gas emissions that the planet can't absorb, of all of those, about 80% of them come from the energy sector, broadly defined, either in generating or using it. And that's why I think it's so important to focus on energy. Not only is it the most profligate example of waste that we have in modern society, but it's also the biggest driver of climate change. Of course, land management, which is where water and food come in, is critical too. We're not going to fix climate change without it, but our focus is around energy. So the last thing I'll say, just thematically, is our investment thesis is built around this theme. We actually have an acronym for it. It's called EDGE in the way that we approach our business. EDGE stands for Efficient and Decentralized Generation of Energy. That's the solution to a lot of the energy waste problems. It's about being efficient And then instead of having centralized energy plant, having decentralized energy centers that waste less energy getting where it's needed. So that's the basic background. Who I am, I set up the business and run it. What I do is invest in solutions to this energy problem that involve getting lower cost, lower carbon, more reliable energy where it's needed, which we think is so important. And then in terms of our plans, and I'm digging into these bits with you, Robert, in a second, our plans are to carry on building our infrastructure portfolio. It's about $2.5 billion of commitments today, investing at every stage of projects, from concept to long-term operations of projects that make a difference to cut out that waste. But also, I think important, I should say, our plans are expanding beyond infrastructure. We've started over the last couple of years to start to make investments in companies, new technologies that are proven, but that can scale up now. So we're starting to take a more of a private equity involvement in the marketplace, as well as and building off the back of our infrastructure program.
Okay, that's great. I have a bunch of questions. I'm curious, in 2007, when you started, it must have been hard selling the idea of resource efficiency, or maybe I'm wrong, and it was very easy, and everybody gave you a big hug when you started. Oh, great. Was it easy? Was it hard? Did they say, what the hell are you leaving HSBC to do this?
Yeah, I had a great job at HSBC, and I'm very grateful to the institution. It taught me a lot, and it was actually a very honorable place to grow up, as an investment professional. I had a real conviction, Robert, that what I wanted to do was focus just on environmental infrastructure and sustainability and crack these big problems. I didn't want to have, it was sometimes easier to invest in real estate or mainstream infrastructure. I wasn't interested, to answer your question, in easy. I was interested in solving this problem, but I also thought that would be incredibly valuable at some point if you could find solutions to these difficult problems. I had no concerns long term that it would pay off and it would be valuable for my investors, for myself. I think, to answer your other question, though, just to give you some sense of this, 90% of all of our scale, capacity and profitability has come in the last 5 years.
Wow.
So that's that. So we are one of the longest burn overnight successes, if you like, in the sector. It did take a long time to build our footprint. We did it the hard and slow way, to answer your question. We started building projects, building by building, project by project. We went into hotels and tried to figure out why they were wasting so much energy with their lighting and insulation, why the windows were open. We were doing this before the LED lamp had been rolled out and popularized, not in the science class when you were a kid, but instead to actually light up the world. There were only 2% of the world's lights were LED when we started to do our first major projects. Now it's over 60% of indoor sales. So very different market. We started, in the late noughties, we were consulting even to some of the world's biggest brands about how to decarbonize their supply chain before this Scope 3 designation even. And look, I spent time in China in factories looking at how to change motors and variable speed drives and trying to implement technology that was working. So it started the hard way, Robert, really designing building projects on the ground inside buildings, building by building. And we got backed by the UK government in 2012. And we became the first investee fund of the British government's Green Investment Bank when it was launched.
Wow.
And that helped us create the first institutional energy efficiency fund to take our building by building approach and start to institutionalize it and create a business model that could be replicated. It's very far-sighted by UK PLC, I think, to back us. Sort of grateful for that. And that was mimicked by Singapore, Ireland, and the New York state governments, who all invited us to set up funds specifically to do energy efficiency projects and deliver them as a service in those markets. So by 2017, 18, we done the first 10% of today's footprint for SDCL, which is to build a series of projects, and we've done it in the UK, in the US, and Singapore, and in Ireland. And then we took our first portfolio public actually in 2018, and we created the world's first really dedicated energy efficiency investment company, which trades to this day. It's called the SDCL Energy Efficiency Income Trust. It's a FTSE 250 company listed on the London Stock Exchange, and it owns about £1.5 billion worth of projects that all do this kind of on-site generation or energy efficiency. So that was a major breakthrough from us. But when we did the IPO, Robert, that was a £100 million portfolio. It's now £1.5 billion portfolio 5 years on. So 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, if I would have told you my £100 million plan was going to become 15 times, 15x in 5 years, you would have laughed. But you know, that's what we've done in terms of our plans going forward. We just want to take what's working and scale it up even further, because we think that the total addressable market for making the energy system more efficient is even bigger than the renewable power sector.
But you, correct me if I'm wrong, you were not developing nuclear fusion at room temperature technology. You were taking technology that works and then convincing a data center or a real estate company or a shopping mall how they can save energy by going this route, correct?
It's exactly right. I mean, and what we were doing 10, 15 years ago is similar to what we're doing today. We identify things that work, and then we incorporate them into institutionally structured projects that can deliver for commercial, industrial, public sector clients major benefits. So, but you know, look, 10, 15 years ago, I was walking around in supermarkets in Ireland, right? I won't give the name of the major corporate, for example, just to spare them their blushes, but walking around in supermarkets, looking at the opportunity to introduce LED lights with, you know, the facilities managers worried that it would make the vegetables look the wrong color and unattractive to buy, or the clothes the wrong color. I was doing LED lighting projects for the highest end hotel groups, and they were worried that the banqueting facilities, the dining room where the people were meant to be having dinner, you know, it wouldn't feel romantic because everybody would look white or blue or something like this from being like lit up by LED lights. So I've been involved in this sector since things that worked weren't really understood. And sometimes what's needed is you need to come up with a solution. Of course, the capital solution is we take away the capex and we deliver these projects as a service, so customers don't have to pay for them up front. But there's also a behavioral and a quality of service layer to that, which is incredibly important. You know, how does the customer know that they're going to get the right lighting, that their buildings are going to be the right temperature, you know, that their power is going to be available, you know, 8,760 hours a year, you know, all the time. And that's the kind of thing that we've had to learn how to do over the course of the last 15 years. We've now got 55,000 buildings connected to our projects around the world. So we've got a great sort of track record and reference basket to be able to get clients comfortable, Robert. But you're absolutely right. We're not going out there and saying, hey, this might work, try it out, you know, this is going to be great. We'd like you to be the kind of beta test for something new. We're taking what works. It's just what works now. The last thing I would say is there are some things that are working now which are really exciting.
Yeah.
You know, when I started, there was kind of the first clean tech boom and bust, what we call clean tech 1.0 in the late 90s. Yeah. There was all sorts of fantastic technology. I'm just getting super excited about it. Huge valuations that crashed. But 15 years later, it's a much more sensible, grounded marketplace. There's still going to be bubbles, but you know, we're finding amazing new technologies that they're going to change the game, solving problems that even we haven't been successfully able to or easily able to solve. How do you cool data centers? You know, and now you can do that with, you know, precision immersion cooling, precision liquid cooling in a way that you couldn't necessarily do that 5-10 years ago. How do you store heat at 1500 degrees? You know, these are big problems, maybe not, you know, at home, but if you're in an industrial facility, how do you store heat? How do you take non-dispatchable renewables and store them properly, either as heat or power or co-generate? So I'm loving this innovation stage of where we are in 2024, which is that there's a lot of absolutely commercially proven technologies, but it reminds me of 15 years ago. So what we like also to find, as well as investing in projects, is the new LED light bulb. Is probably the best way to describe it. What's the new LED lamp? It's not that LEDs didn't work, it's that they
Right, sure.
commercialized. So if we can find that in cooling, in motors, things that most people would find mundane, but we get very excited about because it's the way the world works. That's the kind of thing we like to invest in as well, as long as it works. So
Sure, I get it. But one of the positive things that came out of the horror of the Ukrainian invasion is that suddenly energy became really expensive.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody could, do with less because the price was so high. So has that also continued for you on the industrial side?
I
That
think
people
Yeah, I mean, it woke everybody up. I don't think anybody in Europe was really talking about energy security before that, Robert. I mean, in America, they've been talking about energy security for years, which is why it's actually been the biggest marketplace. Most of our investment is in the United States right now. But that's because they've always had an energy security problem. Even though actually America's been energy independent since 2019. It's always had a real problem. And the problem has actually been not war, like it happened in Europe, but the weather. So the weather just keeps knocking out the grid. New York, Superstorm Sandy 2012, more recently, Louisiana, Texas, Florida. These are huge catastrophic weather events. And over the years, what's happened in America is that you've started to see industrial companies, commercial companies, public buildings wanting to put generators, whether it's solar or cogeneration or waste heat recovery, whatever it might be, generation of energy on site. Because if the grid goes down, it doesn't matter, and they can carry on operating. It actually happens to be cheaper and lower carbon as well, but it's really been about energy security. And nobody cared, Robert, until about 2022 February in Europe. I was writing actually in January 2022 about energy security. And then obviously in February 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, and all of a sudden, a fundamental existential problem, because Europe depended 40% on, and therefore for all marginal demand, on Russia. By the summer, almost all gas had stopped coming in from Russia into Europe. And not only did it push up prices dramatically at one point from about 22 euros a megawatt hour, which is more or less where we are now, on natural gas, to over 300 euros a megawatt.
Whoa.
Yeah. So not only did it have an incredible, I hate the word unprecedented in post-COVID, but an incredible run up in prices. But the availability was the big shock. Like, what are we going to do? Because you can't, unfortunately, 80% of the world's energy is oil, gas, and coal still. You can't run without gas. Europe can't. So what are we going to do? Said Europe. So there was a big availability problem. Storage levels were very low. So, lessons learned, deep lessons learned. Where are we here in 2024? In some senses, there's a bit of good news, right? Gas prices are pretty much back to where they were in 2021. That's not cheap, but it's much more affordable than it was before. But we still have huge availability problems. And I think people really understand now that prices can be extremely sensitive, extremely volatile. We've got to worry about where we're getting the gas from. This is, by the way, before we come on to, do we want to spend the rest of our lives on gas? And I'll come back to that in a second. But in the meantime, where do we get it from? Do we get it from Qatar? Do we get it from the United States? The United States is now the big one. Qatar's in parallel. By the way, we're still taking gas from Russia in 4 countries, including Austria, and we're still actually taking LNG into Belgium and Spain. But that's another story from Russia. But what did we do? So the European Commission said, and this is what was brilliant, and really from our perspective, absolutely brilliant point the European Commission came out with. The first one was, well, we'll double down on renewables. We'll build gazillions of megawatts of offshore wind. But of course, when it was understood that would take a minimum of 15 years and do nothing for energy security in the short term. Another plan needed to be come up with. And what they came up with was a plan called, do you know what it was called? Energy efficiency first. Energy efficiency first, not second, third also. And they said, mimicking what happened in 2014 when Russia last invaded Ukraine with the annexation of Crimea, the European Commission then said every unit, can I spend a moment on this? Every unit of natural gas, they said, that we don't use is 2.6 units of gas we don't need to buy from Russia. Every unit we don't use is 2.6 we don't need to buy from Russia. Why not every unit we don't use is 1 unit we don't need to buy from Russia? And this is what's so interesting, why this efficiency story comes in so heavily. And just to unpack it, what the European Commission was confessing is what I was relating to earlier, which is the biggest, dirtiest secret of the energy sector, that most of it's wasted. So what this maths, just to sort of unpack it a bit, when you extract things like oil and gas, you lose some of the primary energy, the original fuel, in the extraction and conversion process, getting it into pipes. It's roughly 10% of the world's energy gets lost, by the way, in that process of just getting it out and cleaning it up so it can go into a pipeline. What then happens next is that, let's say in the electricity sector, a natural gas molecule will go into a turbine. Typically, that's what the biggest provider of energy in Europe and the United States. And the problem with that is thermodynamics. If every unit molecule of natural gas you put into a turbine, 50% of it makes it out as electricity. The other 50%, energy doesn't disappear, but it turns into something else. It turns into heat. Now, the problem is if you've got centralized energy plant, so you're generating your energy over here, but you're using it over there, the heat is dumped, it's just lost. In fact, this is the biggest source of energy loss in the world. And unfortunately, gas does it, and so does nuke. Same. It's the same thermodynamic process, and you get the same amount of it. So heat is lost, it basically dissipates, it goes up into the atmosphere. Quite a lot of it disappears into space where they don't need it. So by the time your molecules come out, you've lost 10%, you've put it through an energy generator like a turbine, you've lost another 50%. So you've now lost 60% of the primary energy.
Whoa.
But it hasn't left the power plant yet. So when it leaves the power plant, you send it through to the transmission and distribution process, and that will lose another 5 or 10%. So by the time in the United States, energy has got to the front door of buildings, and I'll come on to what happens after that in a second, according to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which has been running data on this for the DOE and in the world since the 1970s, in 2022, the United States was losing 70% of its primary energy before it got to the point of use. And in the UK, if anybody listening is in the UK, if you take all energy sources used to make electricity in the UK, about 58% of it is lost. And that's because we're a major electricity importer, otherwise it would be worse. So that's an extraordinary feature, and that's before it gets to the point of use. Then when it's inside the building, I don't know where you are at the moment, Robert, but a lot of buildings don't have the best lighting, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, insulation, building management systems and control. So they typically waste 10 to 30% of their energy. So if you add it all together, that's why I say the world wastes about 3/4 of its energy. Going back to your point about Russia-Ukraine, that's why the European Commission said for every unit of gas we don't use, 2.6 we don't need to buy from Russia, because they know how crazy it is that all of this stuff is lost on the way. So they came up with a new policy, which is called energy efficiency first. And they said, let's do everything that we can to generate energy locally, so it doesn't need to be lost on the way. If you are going to use natural gas, at least use the heat instead of dumping it. But do everything you can to generate energy locally through renewable sources, solar. So they cut out planning problems associated with developing solar projects on commercial, industrial, public buildings across Europe. They said, use ground and air source heat, huge heat pump stimulus programs associated in different markets. Do whatever you can to decarbonize heat. Do whatever you can to reduce waste inside of buildings. So the European Commission has grasped the nettle. And America also has too, through the Inflation Reduction Act. So very grateful for the support that the DOE is putting in there. UK is at sea on this stuff at the moment, but hopefully over the next few years we'll do better. But broadly speaking, that's what's going on, Robert. You've got this kind of energy security is what drove the Inflation Reduction Act. If you look at the reasons that passed, it was fun, not just because everybody, all the Republicans were delighted about doing something for the climate, it was because it understood that energy security and effectively self-consumption and self-generation was going to be an important part of the story. And it's the same in Europe. The reason we've got all of this shock and awe on how we deal with the energy system and the EU member states, not the UK, unfortunately, is that there's a fundamental understanding that after things like the Russia-Ukraine crisis, this has changed the way the energy system works forever.
But all of the things you're talking about, drilling a hole in the ground and then processing it, at a petrochemical plant, that's, that's from there. So what is being done for all of that energy loss of generating that primary energy to be more efficient? Because you're focused more on once it's produced the power, and then we work where the consumption is to reduce that. How do we get the production actually more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is actually producing locally. Part of it is producing locally, so you can generate energy on site using solar combined with storage. You can get it from the air or from the ground. You can get energy from, as I said, even God forbid you're using the gas pipeline, you can at least not dump the heat, so you can co-generate or create power and heat and cooling at the same time. You can take an enormous problem that the industry has, is it wastes a lot of energy through waste heat and waste gas. As the best example I can think of is if you have a blast furnace, it spews out waste gases. If you've got a wastewater treatment facility, it spews out gases. And a better solution to spewing out gases and polluting the atmosphere is to capture those gases and use them as fuel to drive turbines or create other forms of energy services. So we have abundant technology that works to generate energy locally. So even if you take a gas engine and you at least put it under a building so you can use all of the output energy, you could operate that gas engine at 94 to 96% plus combined electrical thermal efficiency. In other words, double the way that the big units are feeding into the grid in terms of an output and efficiency perspective. So if you have to use it, you at least use it sensibly. But we now have incredible opportunities to use renewables on site. Solar, even in London at the moment, is typically like it's a bit overcast, a bit rainy, but still in the UK, it's cheaper to generate solar on your roof than buy it from the grid.
So you're an overnight success after 17 years, from 2007, but it took you a long time to, took you a long time to convince your family to stick with it rather than your clients. It's always hard. I have my biggest challenge is convincing my wife that what we're doing is the right thing. So now that energy efficiency is number one and everybody is saying, hey, we got to call Jonathan to really scale this up. Are you able to manage all of this demand?
Well, we've scaled our business up pretty substantially. So at SDCL, we have offices in London and New York, in Dublin, which is our new European headquarters, in Hong Kong, Singapore. We've built out our activities. So we've got a pretty substantial business and team. We've got at project level hundreds of people working for us full time in country in different markets like the United States, continental Europe. So that gives us a pretty big execution capability. But our job really at SDCL is to identify the opportunities, develop them, invest in them. And then, Robert, what we do in local markets is we find the best teams, the best contractors, the best delivery partners, the best. We don't sell widgets. We're not a solar company selling solar panels or somebody selling pipes or wires. We're out there finding the best technology in the market. Now, our question that we ask ourselves the whole time is, what's the lowest cost, lowest carbon, most reliable solution to that energy problem? And then we go out and procure it. We get the best design teams locally. We get the best engineering, construction teams locally, and we get the best operation and maintenance requirements in any particular market. If we need full-time employees to make sure that the estate is being managed on site 24/7, we do that. But in parallel to that, we've got contracts with some of the world's largest energy companies to build and then operate systems for us. So that's how we're basically getting scale. It's through trying to keep ourselves as efficient as we can as a business.
But there are constantly new innovation in technology. You were talking about, oops, sorry about that. You were talking about air conditioning.
Yeah.
So European company has developed a circular air conditioning system that uses 90% less CO2, less energy, 90%, and it's circular.
Yeah.
But not always the best management. The technology is great. How do you deal with that? That here's a solution that can scale, and hotels have tested it. Wow, this is great, but the management are not the right people to make it happen.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's a challenge we've been dealing with for 15, 16 years. And I think the short story is, it's great having a really great technology, but it's got to be managed and solved properly. And sometimes, and sadly, it's not always the best technologies that win, but it's the technologies that can be relied upon and deliver the goods. So what we're typically doing there is we're contracting with large companies, Robert, that can guarantee to us the performance, the availability, the reliability, the efficiency of the underlying system, so that we can then pass that, but the benefit of that guarantee on to our clients for whom we're delivering an energy service. If it's a smaller technology company that can provide a product into the larger company that they can then give us comfort, that's great. Sometimes if it's a small or medium-sized company that has a great technology and great management, and there's a strong enough warranty and guarantee package that the product or the service is going to work, and if it doesn't, that we've got recourse to make sure that we can deliver the goods ultimately for our customer, then we'll do that too. But it's got to be and. Great technology, great idea, might work in the future. It's very interesting, but it's not fit for purpose for our infrastructure program.
Do you also look at water efficiency, or is it only energy?
Yeah, so the interface between water and energy is a big one. So we do. We're particularly interested. I mean, the simplest way of answering that question is there are lots of energy technology that use less water. So we've invested in a company recently that does precision immersion cooling, precision liquid cooling. And one of the great benefits of it is not only does it reduce the energy footprint of a data center that it cools by about 50–60%, but it can reduce the water consumption by 80–90%. So sometimes you're not actually investing in the water or the water production, but you're investing in something that dramatically changes the way that can work. Likewise, things like variable speed drives, and motors and pumps and other forms of assets that interact with the water sector. Of course, looking at wastewater treatment facilities is something that we've done a lot of. We currently own the gas grid for Stockholm, which is actually biogas fueled rather than primarily natural gas fueled. It's almost all biogas, and that biogas comes off the back of wastewater treatment facilities that would otherwise be polluting. So
you actually invest in the company. I thought you were mainly doing infrastructure solutions for industrial.
We do. So about 90% of what we do at the moment is about investing in projects. You're right, infrastructure. And that one, which is the Stockholm gas grid, is a project at the end of the day. It's taking those flue gases, those waste gases off the wastewater treatment facilities and piping them round to be a more sustainable solution for gas usage in commercial, industrial, home, and frankly, transport in Stockholm. So that most of what we do is project-based, but we actually do invest in companies as well. We will take stakes, and we do take stakes in, particularly for growth capital. That's really where we're focused. It's companies, Robert, to the point you made, they've got a product that works or a service that works, one of the ways that you can tell it works is it's making money, either generating revenue or profits or very close to profitability. It's got a proven capability in the field. It's solving a big problem. We can add value because we've got lots of clients around the world that might be able to use it. We'll typically try it before we invest in the company. But if we do invest in the company, not only are we a route to market, but we can also turn their product into a service. So, for example, rare earth-free energy-efficient motors. So we've invested in a company like that, and in due course, we want to deliver that as a service to customers rather than asking them to pay for the motors. Same with our precision liquid cooling business. At the moment, clients are buying it for data centers, but if they want to procure it as a service, they can with us. And so on. We even did something like that in the electric vehicle charging space, where we provide fast charging infrastructure for the huge charge point operators like BP, but we have a corporate equity stake in the development company that puts those together so that we can benefit and partner with them on that journey.
Who typically is your investor in your funds, in your various funds and projects?
It's mostly institutional investors, but we've got two different types of fund or investment company under management. One is public. So if you the public company, the SDCL Energy Efficiency Income Trust, is listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange, and that is largely institutionally owned, but there is a big component there of private client investment, whether through directly or through wealth managers. So that's designed to be a vehicle through which individual investors and as well as institutional investors and family offices can invest in a London Stock Exchange listed relatively liquid investment that they can buy and sell. It pays a dividend, and I think a really exciting company. I'm invested in it myself. And then we also run private investment vehicles. Those are typically more geared to larger institutional investors. So whereas there is no substantial minimum investment size for the public company listed in London, obviously it's just an ordinary share you buy and sell in the market. Right. The private funds typically have a $5-10 million minimum commitment. On average, our investors are investing somewhere around 50 to 70 million per investor, and the investor type is institutional, so it's pension funds, it's insurance companies, asset management groups, a couple of sovereign entities that are investing with us.
Do you also look at mobility issues like shipping in energy efficiency in the shipping industry?
Yeah, so we are looking at that market. We haven't got an existing investment in the maritime sector right now, but it's something that we're extremely interested to do. So yes, it's a big focus for us right now in terms of looking at how we can do that in the mobility sector. Right now, I think we're one of the largest investors in fast charging electric vehicle infrastructure in the UK. So a lot of those big BP Pulse facilities being put up around the country, like the one in Birmingham, which is the largest in the UK, second largest in Europe. That's that we financed that. So we've started in fast charging electric vehicles for where we're providing the fast charging infrastructure for the BPs of this world, and absolutely we want to move into other sectors, including but not limited to maritime.
But the vast majority of your investment is in North America and in Europe, correct? Because you said you had offices in Hong Kong and Singapore.
Yeah, so we've got you're absolutely right. I mean, we've ironically, although our real activities in energy efficiency started and we learned our trade on factory floors in China, our first projects were delivered in London and in New York and in Dublin. So we have grown our practice to be almost entirely focused for a period of time on those markets. So about 55% the United States, about 30% is in continental Europe, so the bigger EU member states, about 10 or 15% here in the UK, And we've got a small investment portfolio that we've built over the years in Singapore and in Vietnam. We've done, you asked about heating, but we've done cooling as a service for industrial companies. We're doing rooftop solar as a service for big multinationals in Vietnam. And I think other than our expansion of our private equity business beyond infrastructure, which is a strategic move for us across the group, another area which we're going to be more focused on, I would say, in 2024 than we have been for quite a long time, is the Asia market, because we see a huge opportunity to grow in those markets, particularly the ASEAN markets. So Singapore, Vietnam, where we've got existing footprint and presence, but also expanding into adjacent markets like Malaysia.
I mean, the scale of growth and money flows is dramatically increasing. Energy efficiency first is now the EU T-shirt and their MAGA cap. Are you optimistic or pessimistic that we will have enough bandwidth to turn it around, because it will also impact, obviously, climate if we're burning less?
I'm incredibly optimistic. And can I just put it another way around to be a little bit contrarian for a second? If we were going to be focused entirely on building renewable power capacity, I would be quite pessimistic, and I'll explain why. Not that I don't want that to happen, and I won't be doing it within our portfolios, but if that's what we're relying on, we're not going to get where we need to. And just to put things into context, that's been the basic plan for the last 20 years. And Robert, by the way, to disagree with me if you like, but going over the last 20 years, the world's invested $6 trillion in renewables, about $3 trillion in the grid to enable them. So around $9 trillion, which is fantastic. And I've been part of that, and it's been the best. I love going to COPs these days because it's got 70,000 people rather than 70. It's incredible. It's exciting. It's brilliant. But if you look back, unfortunately, over the last 20 years, what's that $9 trillion done if you're worried about climate? Nothing. Not really. I mean, 2 parts per million have been added to atmospheric CO2 concentration every year for 20 years, except 1 year where it went up a bit. Okay. The total installed capacity, if you compare it to the global energy system of things like wind and solar, is still less than 3%. 82% of the world's energy is still oil, gas, and coal. And although the growth rates associated with renewables dwarf the growth rates associated with, let's say, conventional energy like fossil fuels, the scale of the fossil fuels, unfortunately, is swamping the incremental growth of the renewable energy sector. I don't mean to be depressing. I said I was optimistic.
No.
But this is a real challenge. And by the way, to build the renewables, we need time. It takes time. We build renewables too, but it takes years and years to get from concept through planning to construction to commissioning. Even for small onshore projects, offshore, I think 10, 15 years. Onshore, think 3 to 5 years. So we've only got 6 years of carbon budget left, Robert. So, time matters, right? Cost matters. It's enormous amounts of money that need to be invested in this stuff. And the other thing that matters, which is another problem, is resources. Resources matter. To make wind farms and solar parks and the rest of it takes a lot of metals and minerals, and critical metals and minerals to boot. It takes 15 years to build a mine. That's going to take a lot of copper and nickel and magnesium and the rest of it to build all of this stuff. So the actual resource intensity, the mining requirements, the social and environmental impact associated with blowing up the mountains to deliver that, all things that we need to do in the right way, are going to take a lot of time, money, and resources. And even if we did all of that, it's very difficult to see how that's going to solve the problem on its own. And I'm going to complete the depressing bit and come to the optimistic bit, because all of that really has got to do with renewable power and electricity. Meaning, in other words, it's euphemism for power. But the electricity sector is only 20% of the world's energy system. Today, we're about a third renewable in electricity where it's working. So to green the electrical system, you've got to triple or quadruple the global capacity of renewable energy sector, renewable power sector. But then you only dealt with 20% of the problem. The other 80% of the problem is all the transport fuels and the heat and the gas and the rest of it. So we've just got this incredible. It's not that not that I don't think we'll get there, but I think we have to be like honest and realistic about how long it's going to take, how much money it's going to take, and how much resource it's going to take. It's going to take decades and trillions, probably tens of trillions of dollars, and incredible levels of resourcing in order to do it. Let's go down that path. But the problem is, if we look at how much time, money, and resources it's going to take, we need to do something in the meantime. And this is what makes me most optimistic, because if there was nothing much we could do in the meantime, I'd be really pessimistic. I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? But there's so much we can do in the meantime, because we're wasting 3/4 of the world's energy. I mean, what an incredible gift we've been given in climate solutions, that's something that we can go after. So instead of necessarily building 100 units of new capacity, maybe only we need to build 25 units. And maybe in the meantime, we can start to get to work on cutting out those levels of inefficiency along the way. And maybe by doing that, we can make huge strides on carbon emission reduction, which at the same time save us money and at the same time improve energy security. And that's why the United Nations COP28 Dubai Agreement twinned energy efficiency with renewable as the first call to action of all the 198 member states. It's why the Energy Efficiency Plus program has been introduced in Europe. It's why 20% of the Inflation Reduction Act has gone towards energy efficiency. Not because it's a nice, cuddly, fluffy thing, but because it's actually the largest, fastest, cheapest, and cleanest source of emission reductions, and saves money and improves the security of supply. So for all of those reasons, I'm massively optimistic, because although we've spent 9 trillion on renewables, we are yet to start to get really serious about the efficiency program. And I think that is an abundant source of gain. And I'm super excited about it.
I share your thoughts on that, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't know. I used to work on oil rigs in Iran, in the North Sea, in France, and Texas, and I know what it is to make a hole in the ground, and I know how comfortable it is just to open up the pipeline and make your bonuses. And in a couple of weeks, we're doing to come back to what you were saying about the challenges. We're doing a master class with a guy named Simon Michau, which you might have heard of him. So he's like an ultra nerd that did a 1,000-page report studying. He's a mining expert. How much stuff do we need to execute on full electrification? And he said, it ain't there.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just not 20 times increase in copper production, just copper. So he came up with other things, but if you're right, there are big challenges, but I agree with you. It should not stop you from doing what you're doing now. Will we get there in time? I'm not that optimistic that we'll be able to offset the climate. I'm still more of a fan of biodiversity focus because it's cheaper and quicker. Yeah. But there's no unicorns in biodiversity. That's why the investor doesn't like it.
I say in my book, it's not about all of this or all of that. It's all about renewables. It's all about planting forests. It's about all of it. And I'm not saying that energy efficiency is going to be all of it. I'm just saying, I'm being bold enough to say that it's at least as important as the rest of it.
And it's a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and you asked me the question before, is it easy or hard? Look, you want to do it properly, you want to do it at scale, it's hard. Yeah. But, that's fine. It's fine. Some of the most valuable things in the world are the hardest to get at and deliver. But the payoff is, think about it like this. If the UK government really got to grips with the fact that it was wasting so much energy in producing electricity, let alone the rest of the energy system in the UK, what an incredible opportunity to save not just carbon, but also money. Yeah. So I'll give you an example, a little example that's close to home for everybody, is the health service. So we all unfortunately are human beings and depend on the thing, but it's the health service in any country, but definitely in the UK, is the largest energy user. public buildings, by the way, use about 14% of the UK's electricity and energy.
Wow, I didn't know that.
But the biggest energy users, the NHS, it's about 4 or 5%. So how about this? Most of that energy is being wasted. Now, you know, every time I turn on the television, I do not hear that the NHS has got too much money and it doesn't know what to do with it. And, you know, why not blow it on excess energy? In fact, it's the opposite. It doesn't have any money. So what's it doing? Wasting energy. Why is there almost no on-site generation? Why are about 60% of the lights in the NHS yet to be even changed to LED, which is the lowest hanging fruit, as you would call it? So, you know, there are things that we can do which will make a dramatic difference that are actually cost effective, as well as reducing carbon footprint and improving security. So, you know, I think if you think about that at government level, what happens if you're a copper mine, Robert, or what happens if you're a data center operator, or what happens if you're in warehousing business or any kind of commercial? If what you're doing is wasting energy, and you could be using less to do the same or more, what an incredible competitive advantage opportunity! What an incredible cost efficiency opportunity! And the last point of my rant is, for fun, if you want to know why this isn't being addressed, think about this. Energy is one of the largest overheads, right, for government, for commercial industrial companies. Have you ever heard of a chief energy officer?
No.
So, you know, I think like Europe wasn't really awake to the concept of energy efficiency a couple of years ago, I remain optimistic. Not only is this the biggest problem that can be solved, but that actually through this kind of conversation, through the investments that we're making, through the deepening understanding about what needs to be done to the energy system, that better energy management than just doing the same or more with less is going to take an even greater hold on the way that business and government works.
We're coming to the end, and I promised I would keep it to 60 minutes because you have a really important meeting after this. What can we do to help you?
So that's an amazing question. I mean, three things, one of which is I just think the theme, the narrative around efficiency and resource efficiency, whether it's around energy or anything else, but I mentioned the amount of food, water that's wasted, fashion that's wasted, it's all the same thing. But I think I love having a forum like this through which we can discuss this fundamental problem that needs to be solved. Too often, the problem is discussed as how do we get more solar or batteries or hydrogen or whatever it is out into the market. That's not the problem. The problem is how do we solve the actual problem, which is that too much carbon is being emitted or too much cost is being run or we don't have enough energy security. So first of all, this sort of discussion and popularizing and opening, widening the debate, which is why I do things that are non-financial, like write books, speak as much as I can on TV and on the radio, on podcasts, newspapers, whoever will listen to me, my wife won't. But so that's kind of that's one of three things. The second thing is we are always looking to engage with major corporate, industrial and public sector counterparties. So anybody that's listening today or that's within the TBLI network that represents a heavy end user of energy, and that has an interest in how to do the same or more of their business with using less energy, we would love to engage with. And we have a big team and a huge interest in, and frankly, balance sheet to help address those problems. And then the third one is investment. I mean, we manage funds, one's listed on the London Stock Exchange, and we have other private funds. We are almost always out there looking for to scale up our business, and that relies on two things: more projects and more capital. So we will always welcome discussions with investors interested to support what we're doing.
Jonathan, I really appreciate your time. And also, I need to mention something to show what a mensch Jonathan is. We had originally planned at 3, but he forgot he has to go to see his child's play. So he asked me could move that, and I found that a great reason to move the time, because most of the financial alpha males are not really focused on keep going to their children's play. So that was a great reason to move it, and I really thank you for taking the time today.
Well, can I just say thank you, and thanks to everybody else for accommodating that. Charlie Maxwell is playing Little Bear
Oh, good.
in Goldilocks and the Three Bears today, and he's 8 years old, and I'm very excited about
Much more important than ranting or talking to us. So thank you so much for doing this. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, I'll let you know. And at 4 o'clock, we have the virtual mixer. You're welcome to join, but I know you'll be busy with the play. So, and I hope to see you soon. I'm not sure when, but hopefully soon. Stay well. And thank you for all your great work.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to it. Thank you very much.
You stay well, everybody. See you all at 4 o'clock. Bye-bye.